It's a pleasure to welcome you. My name is Kelvin Lee. I'm in the University of Delaware faculty in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering. And I'm also director of the National Institute for Innovation and Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals, or NIIMBL. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you today. I'm seated today in the Ammon-Pinnisotto Biopharmaceutical Innovation Center, one of the newest facilities on the UD campus. And I'm going to have a conversation as part of our Ask the Expert series with our distinguished guest, Udit Batra. Udit Batra received a bachelor's in chemical engineering from the University of Delaware and then went on to receive his PhD from Princeton University. And he's had a very distinguished career in the biopharmaceutical industry, having served in roles at McKinsey, as global head of corporate strategy at Novartis, as president and CEO of MilliporeSigma, and currently as president and CEO of Waters Corporation. Welcome, Udit.
Thank you, Kelvin.
So before I ask you about your journey, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit, very briefly, about Waters as a company and how they're connected to the biopharma industry.
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me today. It's a great pleasure to see you again and many of your colleagues. Look, if you've had a cup of coffee this morning, if you've eaten breakfast, if you've popped any sort of pill or had an injection, chances are the product that you used has been touched by one of our instruments. We are one of the largest analytical instruments companies in the world, with majority of our sales going into the pharmaceutical industry, roughly 60 to 80% if you include clinical arena as well. And we basically are present in every QA, QC, and manufacturing suite almost globally, especially in the top 50 pharmaceutical companies. So the vaccines that are being used today are being tested on many of our equipment and our columns.
That's really impressive. It must be very satisfying to be in that kind of position, to be an important part of everyone's lives, especially these days in COVID.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's a huge responsibility, right? So I remember when I finished my PhD and entered Merck Sharp and Dome in a lab. I remember two feelings. One, as an engineer, being totally dismayed at the state of bioprocessing. And I know we'll talk about that, and I know you share my feelings about it as well. When I saw that vaccines are still produced in eggs, and that's something that we still live with today. Many of our vaccines are produced in eggs. And the second thing I remember is whatever I was going to do was going to make a difference to more people's health. And I am absolutely privileged now to be present in every lab through my teams and have the same sort of vicarious pleasure now as opposed to a direct pleasure. But the idea is the same. There's a lot of work to do. But this work's going to make a difference to people's lives, and especially right now, going through the pandemic and playing an important role in solving some of these problems is quite satisfying.
Well, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, because I'm, as a faculty member in chemical engineering, I see many great students who want to become very productive chemical engineers, and yet you find yourself leading a major technology company as a CEO. So what was wrong with engineering? Didn't you like engineering?
No, I would say I still love engineering. I'm still an engineer. And there are a lot of similarities in what you learn in engineering in particular, and what you do in a business, right? I mean, you take really a lot of science, a lot of chemistry, a lot of biology, a lot of physics, and look for the simple scaling principles and use mathematics to help you do it, right? So we as engineers don't have the ability to memorize a lot, so we take an easier path, learn a lot of math and figure out what are the 2 or 3 things that matter, and then use those to build equipment, build buildings, build whatever, but based on very simple principles. And that's what you do in business. You have a lot of complex information, analogy being science, economic information, finance information, supply chain information, technology information. And in that sea of information, you look for the essence of what matters. And you then try to quantify it using financial principles and then form a virtuous loop so that whatever you're generating in sales and profit is reinvested in technology and understanding science better, scaling principles better, and the like. So the structured thinking that you develop, the ability to take complex information, simplify it to the essence, use analytical techniques to do it is absolutely applicable in engineering. And in leading large organizations, I think one thing that we learn over time, and I guess it's more and more, and having spent some time with you guys in the chemical engineering department, what is more emphasized now than was when at least I was growing up, are the softer skills, right? And how do you build the ability to work with people and not just with equipment? That is something that you need to have as a leader as well.
Indeed. So as you think about that evolution from engineer to now corporate executive, would you say there was a moment in time where you thought the business aspect was the direction you were going to go, or was it more of a natural kind of slower evolution as you gain more knowledge and skill?
Kelvin, I wouldn't be able to give you an exact moment. As many things in life, we come up with stories in retrospect, right? And I could construct a story of the inflection points, and it could be quite interesting. But I don't think it is like that, right? I think it's more gradual, as you rightly pointed out. And there are events where you make a decision and it takes you towards the left, and you don't know at that point if the left is better than the right. And something similar happened to me. I mean, I was in research at Merck Sharp and Dome, wanted to write papers and make a difference in vaccines and in pharma through research. But some of my friends started going into this universe of business and marketing. And at that point, for me, marketing was just the color of the pills that we manufactured. I had no idea what it was. But at Merck, I got promoted and I started leading a lab. I didn't know how to do budgets. I didn't understand accounting and finance. And I said, there must be some discipline here too. Otherwise, how are these companies run? So I started taking classes in the evenings to demystify accounting and demystify finance. And I used to drive to the Wharton School of Business in the evening, take evening classes, and then got interested in that. I said, this is not so difficult. It's actually quite complex as well. It is interesting, and perhaps learning this would be interesting, right? So I just started learning. Had the chance to go to McKinsey and Company, and really, again, a pretty demanding place where structured thinking is valuable and problem solving is helpful. And I think was the starting point. And then a whole bunch of other things happen that lead you in a different direction. But I am super happy to be leading a technology company, because I get to do both things. I get to read papers, I get to talk to some of the very smartest people in the world, and I get a chance to impact a lot of lives as well. So it's absolutely terrific. But I wouldn't have planned it this way. I would have not known when I was graduating from chemical engineering at Delaware that this is what I would be doing now.
Fair enough. So the biopharma industry really seems to be undergoing a lot of change. And frankly, I feel like I could have said that 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, and I'll probably say it even again 5 years from now. But perhaps, the last few years in particular has seen a lot of change, but even before that. But what are some of the most exciting directions that you see the industry going?
Yeah, lots, right? I mean, you could list a huge number of things that are happening all at the same time. And you don't need to go any further than what we've seen in the pandemic, right? To be able to sequence the virus and manufacture a vaccine and now deliver it to billions of people, right? I mean, isn't that amazing? We could have not thought of being able to do that even 5 years ago. And even at the beginning of the pandemic, if somebody had asked you, well, it's going to be an mRNA vaccine, and I think you and I talked about this around that time. Is it going to be an mRNA vaccine? And are we going to produce it in record time to be able to get it to so many people? And is it going to work this well? Right? We wouldn't have predicted it. And it was only possible because we chose to collaborate globally, all sorts of disciplines. It was only possible because we were able to use data in real time, data analytics in real time, right? And not just in sequencing the virus and looking at its variants and thinking of what the production process should be, but also in running clinical trials. We would not have been able to choose the right clinical sites, get real-time data, discuss it with regulators, get the process moving, and not to even begin talking about the complex supply chain to scale up the manufacturing. I mean, I was at Millipore at the time, and we had to scale up enzyme manufacturing from a milligram quantity to 3 large 20,000 liter bioreactors in 2.5 months. We had to scale up our Danvers facility that produces single-use bioreactor systems, and it's still being scaled up after a year and change since I left. I mean, an unbelievable amount of technology development. And finally, the third being incentivizing innovation during this time of the pandemic. So I feel there's a lot going on. And if I were to pick 2 or 3 trends, I'd say, look, number one, the application of data analytics, right? And not just computational techniques, but data analytics, meaning turning correlations into causation. And I think as engineers, we really want causation as opposed to correlation, because then you can use it to scale things, right? And so that's, I think, a revolution that's happening, and it's helping us go into spaces that we wouldn't have been able to go in the past. Second is of course, the availability of genomics tools, but also now proteomics tools, the ability to analyze different types of macromolecules. And the third is the novel types of modalities that are now being used to address diseases. And this is super exciting. It's exciting, but it also challenges us, right? And this is where we are collaborating together with the University of Delaware. I mean, the grand challenge in the biopharmaceutical industry is separating the process from the product, right? It is one of those rare industries where when you file a product with the regulator, the regulator says, how did you manufacture it? I also want to know that, because I don't believe that you know what you have in your product. Right? That's exactly what they're saying. And the irony here is that we've been producing those vaccines, those products for 20, 25 years, while the practice of medicine has evolved dramatically, and the practice of engineering has evolved dramatically. We're stuck in the Stone Ages with the process because we are so afraid to change it. And that, for me, is a grand challenge that we have to attack.
It's one of those topics when I talk to people who aren't, working as part of this community, just the idea that a company that brings some of these kinds of medicines to market, like vaccines or biologics like therapeutic antibodies, that in this country, the FDA doesn't actually give them an approval to sell the product. They give them a license to do the manufacturing, which allows them to sell the product, and that the FDA is actually regulates the manufacturing. It doesn't regulate the molecule itself. That's all discovery R&D, and that's not part of the regulated space. And that's kind of an interesting nuance that I think speaks to how complicated the system is, and what some of the opportunities are.
I tend to agree, but that said, that does not allow us to abdicate the responsibility of doing engineering. Right? I mean, who says that you have to manufacture in an egg when you can manufacture in a beaker or in a bioreactor? Right. And the bioreactor is better controlled, and you have modern technology, you can get a lot of data out of it, as long as you assure people that the vaccine is the same. The product is the quality attributes, the critical quality attributes of the product are what matters, because that is what has the clinical efficacy, not the process itself. And I think that's something that I know a lot of people are now engaged in, as we are as well.
Indeed. So you alluded to kind of an agreement and relationship that Waters and the University of Delaware have formalized. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your perspective of what that relationship is, what is Immerse Delaware, and what is Waters looking to accomplish with that, and why the University of Delaware?
First, let me say thanks to you and a lot of conversations you and I had over the years on the topic, and the tremendous support we've received from the President's office, from the Dean's office in engineering, and of course my colleagues at Waters, right? And we basically at Waters, we believe that these are grand challenges that can only be solved through collaborations. And in order to solve the process product challenge, which we just alluded to, we felt we wanted to find an institution where we could work together with leading thinkers in the academic space, leading regulators from various parts of the world, manufacturers of pharmaceuticals, and us as tools companies. And it's not our monopoly. It should be a whole bunch of people working together. And the problem has its primacy. And we felt that we wanted to find a place where all of these were already there together. And with NIIMBL, you guys already have established such an ecosystem. we wanted to go a step further. We said it's all good to be part of the ecosystem, but we want it to be a water space where we would invite many colleagues and others to come in so that we could orchestrate how we wanted to take innovation, not just from concept, from idea to proof of concept, but from proof of concept to product. So this is a unique collaboration where our ambition is to separate the process from the product by working on 3 areas. And you know this as well, and you can elaborate if I get this wrong. It's in the area of sampling, it's in the area of analytical development, and it's the area of data analytics. We believe all 3 of these pillars are required to characterize the biopharmaceutical process for manufacturing, not just therapeutic antibodies, but bispecific antibodies, cell therapies, viral vectors, and you name it, more complex and more interesting, the better. But we wanted to establish these 3 work streams as a starting point in collaboration, and then set up a collaboration where Waters colleagues would be physically present on the campus of the University of Delaware in the Star campus, co-located with faculty, students, and postdocs, and perhaps other collaborators. Eventually, the goal being that we come up with marketable technologies that either get commercialized independently as startups or as part of Waters. We're rather agnostic about that. We want to see technologies evolve from that collaboration. I'm super excited. I mean, it's amazing to listen to the starting project plans, and I know we've purchased some equipment already. So I'm raring to go. I just hope we can get started ASAP.
Yeah, I think that feeling of being excited about what this relationship is going to bring is certainly mutual. I think the people on this end at the university have been working very hard to be very engaged and active and good partners. And so I think we're all excited to see the fruit that will be born from that relationship. So thank you for helping establish that. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about any advice you might offer to UD students or even alumni who are thinking about, what career directions they might want to go in or even pivot in terms of aligning for the biopharma industry. That could be manufacturing, that could be on the discovery side, that could be, a variety of ways. But there's people who work as part of the ecosystem, and then there's lots of other people who don't, and who might have questions about what the value is. Why would I want to do that? What advice would you share with them?
Look, I mean, first, just a generic comment, right? I mean, if you're picking an industry to work in, at least I find if you have a choice, and sometimes you don't have a choice. Early on in my life and my career, I didn't have a choice. I'm blessed to have a choice at some point in time. And if you have a choice, picking one where you make a difference to people beyond yourself is terribly satisfying, right? I mean, every day you get up and you say, what I do actually makes a difference, and I can see it in my family, I can see it in my friends, and I can see what's happening, and I make a difference, although a small difference, but I do make a difference. I think that for me is one of the most important decisions one can make. But that said, and I just talk about myself and what has worked for me and what I look for in leaders as we bring them into our organization. Number one is invest in your competence, right? There are many examples of this, right? So moving away from a research career after having spent 5 years at Merck after my PhD, I mean, I was very well established, doing very well. I felt this was a great career I could have had, but I wanted to learn something different, and I wanted to learn something new, and it was a risk. I took business classes and jumped headfirst into McKinsey, a competitive organization where I started at the bottom of the totem pole and had made pretty far up the chain at Merck. And it was a humbling experience at the beginning, but I tell you, it was a terrific, terrific experience. So investing in your competence is absolutely the first thing I would advise. Second, make sure that you spend time on being aware of your stressors, investing in your self-awareness, right? Very often EQ is highlighted, right? These days people talk about emotional intelligence, but I think just basic self-awareness, looking inward, introspection on what is your stressor. Are you good in the morning? Are you good in the afternoon? What type of behavior stresses you is super helpful, because we are a sum of and a superposition of many moods and behaviors and times and diets. And I think it's good to be aware of it so that you can deal with yourself. And so I get up fairly early in the morning. I'm very good in the morning in terms of concentration. And I'm better if I've eaten something at breakfast. I'm just giving you some mundane examples, but it gets more sophisticated the more time you spend meditating and thinking about and feeling and understanding yourself. And the third is compassion. Right. I mean, we are living in a world where the world is super connected, and not everyone feels the same about everything. Right. I mean, the vaccine itself it should not be a divider in our country, but it is. And it's okay for people to have a different point of view, taking time to understand it. And the only way you understand it if you've invested in your self-awareness. And then if you invest in that, you can then start spending time thinking through and being empathetic to another person's point of view. And all these three areas are areas one can develop. Competence is obvious, but then self-awareness through meditation, through introspection, and then compassion through actually actively learning about other cultures and other disciplines. And all those three things help me day in, day out, both in my personal and my professional life. So rather generic advice, but I'd say I've seen value in that throughout my career, and I'm always ready to learn new ways. But these are the three pieces I would advise.
I want to build a little bit on some of this and just ask about what thoughts and perspectives you have when it comes to hiring a workforce in a technology industry, and in particular in the biopharma industry. I know I hear a lot of questions and concerns about people who work in the industry about trying to find and retain a talent pool. What are your thoughts and experiences on that front?
Yeah, I think you touched upon one of the key issues that is rather contemporary issues in terms of the scarcity of talent. There's always been a scarcity of dedicated talent, but on the flip side, you can and the levers that you use to address it are still the same. Right. First, you train people internally, right? So for instance, as data analytics has picked up, we've initiated a program in coding for everyone, for our blue collar workers, for everyone across the whole organization. And we feel that that's a tool that people can use as automation picks up, as data analytics picks up, to pivot from one career to another. Second is hiring not just mid-career folks, but also early in career folks. And I think that's the second piece. The third, on the scarcity of talent, I mean, I think it's a question of realizing that we're a global community, right? And that's the third lever, to not be hostage to one location or another, right? I mean, we find great talent actually virtually everywhere in the world. The question is, are you able to tap into that talent and give them infrastructure to succeed? So one of the things I'm really impressed by is called the Community Biotech Initiative at MIT. What they do is they basically connect students, faculty, technology workers across the globe in Latin America, parts of Africa, parts of Asia, who otherwise will not have access to equipment, to education, to talent, and connecting the global community to solve specific problems. And we did that during the pandemic. We did that during to address other problems as well. So there are several levers. While the scarcity is there, it's always been there. Now it's a bit more acute, but the systemic solutions are similar, right? It's training, it's being open to recruiting, and being global about what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So what somebody in the audience has kind of asked a question about, would you be able to speculate on, a particular major technical barrier that biopharma needs to overcome to move that needle to separate process from product and rethink how biomanufacturing is done?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit self-serving, to be honest. If we come up with analytical technologies that can analyze each step of the process and separate each step rather than trying to solve the whole problem all at once, if there are better analytical technologies and better data analytics, I think that can allow us to separate the product from the process much more simply. And it'll also allow us to convince people, right? I mean, a lot of this is also, Kelvin, as you know, socialization, right? That's why working at the University of Delaware and having the regulators there as well, having deep respect from them, I think will help us, right? So we can't do this on our own and say, well, here's the solution, guys, you have to adopt it. It doesn't work like this. You have to take people along the way. So whatever technology we bring in, and I think analytical technologies we bring in, we've got to get the results, have everybody see it, have peer-reviewed discussions, and rather not be in a competitive environment. Right. I mean, and as a company that competes in a pretty healthy environment, I still feel these problems are systemic, right? And a whole bunch of people need to work together and solve the problem. And I feel taking analytical technologies and creating an environment that is not threatening, as we have now with Immerse in Delaware, I think is a starting point.
That's great. So we have time for maybe just one more brief question. So I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit about what COVID has taught you about leading a large organization, because I think there's the technology piece and the role you play in the ecosystem, and I think that's one element. But thinking about your role in trying to manage and lead, a big organization with a lot of different kinds of employees in a lot of different locations, each, as you alluded to earlier, with their own perspectives, what have you learned?
Look, I'll break it into two parts. One is about yourself, and then the second is the impact that you have on others, right? About myself, I have always enjoyed sort of introspecting, thinking alone. But what I learned is I need 3 dimensions. I cannot function only in 2 dimensions forever. I've enjoyed the time that I have had alone, but I think I need to be able to talk to people. So, and I think that's something that you don't understand if you are traveling as much as I used to travel for about a decade. Almost every 2 weeks, I was on a plane, especially to Europe. And I mean, you don't realize how valuable the face-to-face interaction is until you miss it. And so that, I think, is a personal reflection. Now, in terms of leading an organization, it goes along the same dimensions, and there are 3 aspects to it. The first one is, when I joined during the pandemic, I joined Waters on September 1st of 2020, smack in the middle of the pandemic. My learning was accelerated dramatically. I have never been able to ingest so much information so fast, because I was able to travel to China virtually, to India, to Japan, to all parts of the globe, and ingest a lot of information. Right? So when you're coming into a new role, you want facts and you want to talk to a lot of people. And you know what? I am more connected to my organization than I've ever been in other roles in the past, right? Because we have weekly sort of sessions. I have meetings with sales teams, 8 or 10 on a panel, and we debate and discuss. And I feel like I'm super connected, right? And technology has helped lead such an organization. Second, and it's paradoxical. The second learning is that while you go through, and we're going through a transformation, while you go through a cultural transformation, there is a lot of strength in results, right? And you can show those results to people. And I feel during the pandemic, we were able to do it, but there is also something lost without having, again, the 3-dimensional interaction, right? And I feel that is something that we're missing. So it's paradoxical. While the virtual world accelerates your learning, the virtual world diminishes your contact. And I think the third learning in this time is that collaboration matters more than we've ever given it credit.
Indeed, for better or worse. Hopefully, we'll take the learnings and I'll be able to move forward sooner than later. I really want to thank you for your time today, Udit, and I want to thank the audience for your engagement and participation. It's been great to have this conversation and an opportunity to catch up, and we look forward to great things coming not only from Waters, but also from the Waters and UD collaboration moving forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelvin. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.